An angel that vanishes under X-ray, a smile that becomes a mask when mirrored, a notebook that sketches the bones of machines centuries too soon. Was Leonardo da Vinci simply the sharpest observer who ever lived? Or did his genius intersect a larger mystery? Tonight we test the claims, not your faith, by putting the evidence on the table and the method in your hands. Let's explore with CA Media the story you thought you knew, seen from both sides. There is a special chill that runs through you the first time you turn a fragile Renaissance page and realize the drawing in front of you looks uncannily like something that didn't exist for centuries. A helical flying screw that reads like the ancestor of a rotor. A squat armored carriage bristling with angles. Mechanical limbs, pulleys, and weights that echo the balancing act of modern robots. We know the name attached to those pages, Leonardo da Vinci. We know his time, 15th and early 16th century Italy. But what we don't quite know is how one man seemed to sketch past the edge of his own century. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Tonight, we are going to walk a narrow bridge between two readings of the same past. On one side is consensus history, the training, workshops, patrons, and relentless observation that shaped Leonardo's mind. On the other is a speculative reading popular with ancient astronaut theorists, an argument that some patterns in his art and notebooks hint at contact with knowledge beyond his time. We are not here to declare a verdict. We are here to compare, to test, and to ask better questions. Our path has three promised payoffs. First, a conservation mystery. In one celebrated painting, part of a figure appears to vanish under X-rays. Is that simply chemistry and studio routine or an intentional hide-and-seek? Second, a demonstration you can replicate at home. Mirror a painting along a central line and composite the halves. Some viewers see faces emerge from the symmetry, strange, unsettling faces. Is that a human brain chasing patterns? Or a message that only appears when you know the trick? And third, we'll map the line from Leonardo's notebooks to machines that eventually flew, crawled, and gripped in our own age. Not as proof of prophecy, but as a reminder that the same engineering problems return again and again, across centuries. To make sense of any extraordinary claim, we start with the ordinary world it lives in. Florence in Leonardo's youth was a place of power and proximity. Guilds, wealthy patrons, a church whose visual language saturated daily life. In such a world, the workshop was a school and a shield. Secrets were practical, not mystical. Painters guarded recipes for pigments and glazes. Sculptors hoarded tricks for weight and balance. If a brilliant young artist adopted the habit of keeping certain methods private, mirror writing, tight circles of study, careful notebooks, that might be less about conspiracy than survival, yet there are anomalies. Leonardo's choices sometimes look like he is testing the edges of what can be shown, or who gets to see it. When his peers leaned towards saints and scriptures, he painted a monster's head on a wooden shield so lifelike that, so the story goes, his own father recoiled at first glance. When he wrote notes to himself, he often did it backward, legible in a mirror. When he studied the human body, he worked in a climate that could be hostile to such inquiry, sometimes in secret, sometimes under the protection of powerful friends. And later, long after he put down his quill, some viewers claim they can find faces lurking in his most famous portraits if the image is mirrored and carefully aligned. Are these patterns meaningful, or are we looking too hard? This episode keeps two promises: respect for faith and for facts, and a healthy appetite for the unexplained. When we examine religious paintings, we will name the theological symbols and the conventions of iconography first. Then we will contrast them with the alternative view. When we show a mirrored composite, we'll demonstrate the exact steps and remind you that Pareidolia, our tendency to see faces in clouds, belongs to all of us. And when we end the night, we will not ask you to believe anything on authority. We will leave you with tests that could move a skeptic, documentation, lab evidence, and engineering reconstructions that either work or don't. So let's step into the candlelit studio, where ink dries fast and secrets live in the margins. If genius has edges, how did one man draw beyond them? And what exactly was he trying to show? Imagine the city as Leonardo saw it. A lattice of narrow streets, bells marking the hours, the scent of wood smoke and varnish. Talent mattered, but patronage mattered more. Wealthy families commissioned altarpieces and portraits. Guilds enforced standards. The church provided both subject matter and limits. In this ecosystem, a workshop was less a single artist's stage than a team sport. Apprentices preparing panels, assistants blocking color, masters resolving hands and faces. Collaboration was normal, and so were mixed materials. Different pigments, binders, and underdrawings layered across months or years. This is the first key to understanding secrecy without conspiracy. A studio's recipes were intellectual property. If your glaze had a glow others couldn't match, you kept the ratios tight. If your perspective tricks dazzled patrons, you guarded the geometry. Mirror writing, which Leonardo often used in his notes, fits neatly into that mindset. It's not magic, not a code for occult messages. It's a way to keep a notebook private in a crowded shop and to slow casual snooping. A small mirror on the desk turns the scribbles back into clarity for the person who wrote them. There is another reason a cautious genius might hide methods: reputation. Renaissance Italy loved novelty but feared scandal. Anatomy could be praised as service to art in one city and punished as impropriety in another. A misjudged commission could stall a career. If you're Leonardo, brilliant, mercurial, supported by powerful patrons, you learn to veil as much as you reveal. You might draw the mechanism but leave the power source vague. You might hint at a device without explaining the tolerances that would make it run, and yet caution can sit beside ambition. Renaissance Italy also connected people and ideas across long distances: trade routes, traveling artisans, imported texts. Greek and Roman treatises resurfaced. Arabic optics and mathematics filtered into Latin. Workshops experimented with devices, fountains, automata. In that lively exchange, what looks impossible from a distance often turns out to be a clever extrapolation from what was already known. The consensus story of Leonardo's brilliance starts here. An obsessive observer in a city that rewarded mastery, with just enough pressure to keep his best thinking tucked a little out of sight. We keep this context in our pocket as we step to the first anomaly. A young artist who, when everyone else painted salvation, chose to paint fear. The story goes like this. A merchant asks Leonardo's father for a decorated shield. The young artist takes a round of wood into a room and begins to work. He studies lizards and snakes, the patterns of their scales, the wet shine of an eye, the way a tongue forks and darts. He paints a monster, a head so real that when his father opens the door he startles, almost drops the shield, and then laughs with relief. Whether the tale is embroidered or not, the point is the same. Where many apprentices sharpened their skills on saints and angels, Leonardo aims directly at terror and anatomy. Two readings present themselves. The consensus reading is practical and persuasive. The shield was a showcase of technique. Hyper-real textures, perspective that bends the eye, the control of light to sculpt form, these are skills patrons pay for. A startling image proves value in a crowded market. It tells future clients, this hand can deliver whatever you dream of. The speculative reading asks a different question: why this subject and why this early? When an artist returns again and again to faces that hover at the edge of the human, serene smiles with unsettling undercurrents, bodies opened like maps, some viewers wonder if the Medusa was less a stunt than a signal. Not evidence, not proof, just the first crack in a pattern they believe points beyond ordinary experience. Both readings can be true at once. A showpiece can also be a manifesto. What matters for us is what the choice reveals about Leonardo's appetite. He isn't content to repeat what the world expects. He probes the edges, fear, flesh, the moment when a face is still a face but threatens to become something else. That appetite will surface again, in a conservation lab, under X-rays, when one part of a painted figure seems to vanish into thin air. Hold that thought. We're heading into the gallery. Walk with me into a quiet room and stand before a famous scene, the Annunciation, a messenger bringing news to Mary. From a distance, the painting behaves like a painting. Color, gesture, a softly lit angel. Then conservators aim an X-ray at the panel and something uncanny happens. Under that invisible light, a portion of the angel appears to fade, as if the figure's presence depends on how you look. Here's the consensus framework first. X-rays pass differently through different pigments and binders. Studios mixed materials. Multiple hands could contribute across time. A change in lead content or ground can make elements disappear in an X-ray, even though they're plainly visible to the eye. In workshops like the one Leonardo trained in, assistants might block out parts with one recipe, a master might refine with another. Technical imaging often exposes these layers. It is a feature of studio practice, not a hidden code. Now the speculative reading. Some viewers look at that vanishing angel and see an intentional invisibility, a choice to leave a trace that only reveals itself when technology catches up. If an artist were drawn to secrecy, if he already used mirrors in his notes and guarded methods in a crowded shop, could he have left other experiments, visual hide-and-seek, inside the paint? The key is method. We don't have to choose a story by faith. We can put the image side by side, original, X-ray, infrared reflectogram. We can explain simply how each tool interacts with layers of paint. We can lay out a plausible workshop sequence that produces the effect, and we can acknowledge why some still find the result suggestive. The evidence doesn't force a conclusion. It invites a question. When an artist learns to hide in plain sight, where else might he practice the habit? Keep your eyes tuned to absence as well as presence, because next we hit a silence on the calendar itself, a gap in the record that fuels the boldest claims of all. Turn the parchment pages of Leonardo's life, and a section goes strangely thin. Between 1476 and 1478, the documents quiet down. Commissions, receipts, letters, fewer than you would expect for a rising talent. In biography, silence is a tricky substance. It can mean nothing at all, and it can mean everything. The consensus reading stacks the ordinary possibilities first. Workshops kept poor paperwork. Apprentices and assistants did tasks that never bore their names. Artists traveled, shadowed patrons, or paused between major commissions. Social turbulence, even legal or personal trouble, could make a figure step off stage. None of that requires a cosmic script. In a world without smartphones and credit card trails, it's easy to slip between the lines. And yet the speculative reading points to a short autobiographical note. Leonardo once described entering a dark cave, feeling both fear and compulsion to go in. For ancient astronaut theorists, the cave becomes a symbol, contact, initiation, knowledge coming from a place we cannot see. To them, the missing years aren't a bureaucratic hiccup. They're a veil. We can treat the silence with respect without making it carry more than it can hold. Ask the rigorous question, what would move the needle? A dated letter from Leonardo describing an unusual teacher. A patron's diary hinting at extraordinary demonstrations. Technical notes that suddenly shift in sophistication with no plausible through line from known sources. Absent those, the missing years remain a canvas anyone can project on. Skeptics with mundane explanations, believers with extraordinary ones. By the time the record grows louder again, Leonardo's range feels wider. City maps with uncanny accuracy, mechanisms that anticipate problems engineers still puzzle over. Was that growth the inevitable arc of a prodigy, practice meeting opportunity, or the trace of a more startling instruction? The calendar won't tell us, but his working habits might. Let's step into the studio where the air smells of oil and paper, and watch him do something that makes secrecy a daily practice. In the candlelight, you can see veins of the paper, the tremor of a fine line, the patience of a hand that will not rush. Leonardo's anatomy studies are among the most exquisite documents of observation in any age. Muscles braided like ropes, valves nested like tiny doors, the skull opened with the care of a surveyor drawing a map. He did this work in a climate of tension. Attitudes toward dissection varied by place and time. In some contexts it drew sanction, in others tolerance or even quiet support. What never varied was the need to be careful about where, about who could know, about how the work was presented. This is where secrecy becomes a habit. On his desk, a small mirror flips backward script into legibility. Right left to right, but reversed. Hold the mirror near and it reads clean. The trick is practical. It slows casual reading by prying eyes in a shared space. It also shapes the brain's relationship to words. You think in reflection. You write with an awareness that not every viewer is your viewer. Some see in this a symbolic doorway to the next claim. If Leonardo composed his notebooks with reversal built in, might he have left reversible ideas elsewhere, in paintings whose full stories require a mirror to coax them out? The consensus answer is, not necessarily. Artists don't always carry tricks across media. But the habit primes us to test paintings with the same spirit we test notebooks. Patiently, reproducibly, with an eye for what appears only when you change the way you look. There is an ethical thread here too. The anatomy pages are not horror. They are humility. They belong to a larger project, to see what is and to name it with precision. If the world you live in punishes curiosity some days and rewards it others, you learn to tune your signals. Sometimes you publish openly. Sometimes you tuck the most delicate thinking behind the glass of a mirror. The next experiment moves from paper to paint. It is simple enough for anyone to repeat and controversial enough to divide a room. Open any public domain image of the Mona Lisa. Draw a true vertical down the center. Duplicate the image. Mirror the duplicate. Now slide each half toward the line until the features align: nose, eyes, mouth. Composite them. Toggle the layer on and off. Some viewers will gasp. Others will shrug. A face appears in the seam, strange, mask-like, with a symmetry no human carries. Try the same with St. John the Baptist, Leonardo's late painting with that ambiguous smile and the finger pointing upward. For many, the mirrored composite grows even more unsettling. Two guardrails keep this honest. First, named Pareidolia. Humans find faces in clouds, trees, power outlets. Once you look for a pattern, you often find it. Second, be transparent about the method. Show the line, the mirror, the alignment. This is not a magic trick, not AI, not a filter that invents pixels. It is a reproducible symmetry test, one that will produce a face-like image in many works and none in others. What do the two readings say? The consensus view: mirrored faces are a side effect of how brains read symmetry and how painters balance composition. Without explicit documentation that Leonardo intended such a reveal, the image is interesting but not meaningful. The speculative view: if an artist thought with mirrors in his notes, if secrecy and reversal were part of his daily practice, the possibility that he tucked mirror-dependent images into paintings is at least worth testing across a broader sample. His works, his students, and even artists outside his circle as controls. You don't have to decide tonight. You can run the experiment yourself. That is the value of this beat. It's not about winning an argument. It's about method. When you change how you look, when you literally reflect the image, new shapes arrive. Some are accidents. Some may be more than that. Both possibilities keep curiosity alive, and so we widen the lens. We're artists of the age, including but not limited to Leonardo, placing odd objects in skies and margins. And if so, what did they mean then? And what do we make of them now? Scan a wall of Renaissance paintings, and you'll notice a familiar vocabulary of light. Halos like thin discs, radiant mandorlas almond-shaped around sacred figures, beams and stars signaling the divine. Iconography, the language of symbols, explains much of this. A disc around a head is not a craft. It is sanctity. A beam is not a searchlight. It is glory. When conservators catalog a work, they often note these elements with the same matter-of-fact tone they use for pigments. And yet, even after you account for iconography, some details still look strange to modern eyes. A dark ovoid in the sky with rays that read almost technological. A figure in the background pointing up at a small object while a dog barks. A sphere that to 21st century viewers raised on satellite photos resembles, well, a satellite. Ancient astronaut readers gather these as a pattern and connect them to textual accounts. Sailors describing lights that hovered over a ship, a chronicle of a disk crossing the night. It's easy to see why the idea sticks. It is cinematic. It is suggestive. The consensus response offers immediate alternatives. The light sailors saw could be St. Elmo's fire, a natural electrical phenomenon that dances on masts during storms. A disk can be a halo or a meteor described in the language available at the time. A sphere isn't a satellite. It's a well-known symbol, a globe of the world, or the eye of God, or a shorthand for the heavens. When you know the grammar of sacred art, much of the mystery subsides. But not all of it. And that is where good storytelling sits, in the space where two explanations compete honestly. What matters is the standard we apply. If we claim a sky object is a craft, we should be able to show that its meaning in that painting cannot be accounted for by iconography, context, or known natural phenomena, and that similar objects behave differently across works in a way symbolism can't explain. Until then, the wider pattern remains a mirror. Hold it one way, and you see faith. Hold it another, and you see flight. We end, not with a verdict, but with a checklist. What would change a skeptic's mind, and what would satisfy the believer that nothing less will do? Let's gather what we've seen and place it on one table. On one side, the consensus model, a singular mind, trained in demanding workshops, guarded by patrons, nourished by the rediscovery of classical texts and the movement of ideas across trade routes. In that world, Leonardo's notebooks are not prophecy. They are extrapolation at the highest level. His flying screw is a thought experiment about lift. His automata are rehearsals in balance and force. His anatomy is the artist's search for truth in the body. The X-ray mystery is chemistry and teamwork. The mirrored faces are byproducts of symmetry and human pattern seeking. The sky objects are the grammar of faith. On the other side, the speculative model, a pattern of secrecy that goes beyond workshop privacy. A habit of mirror thinking that might carry over into paint. Gaps in the record that invite bold interpretations. Mirrored composites that feel too designed to be random. And a background chorus of historical sightings that, when assembled, sound like whispers from a larger story. In that world, Leonardo's career intersects a mystery older and wider than any one city. These two readings are not enemies. They are lenses. You can hold both without betraying either your love of evidence or your appetite for wonder. But lenses are only as good as the tests we run through them. So here are the tests that would move a skeptic like me closer to the speculative claim, and if they fail, would strengthen the consensus case. Test 1. Documentation. If letters, workshop notes, or marginalia surfaced that explicitly described planning a mirror-dependent image in a painting, a line, a centerline, reflect, and a face appears, that would be extraordinary. Short of that, a pattern across multiple works, consistent in method and placement, documented with conservation images, would still be meaningful. Test 2. Conservation evidence. If forensic imaging revealed layers or underdrawings that only make compositional sense when mirrored, guidelines that line up in reflection but not in the final painting, that would argue for intent rather than accident. If pigment choices created predictable X-ray behavior that spelled out a secondary image when mirrored, more compelling still. Test 3. Engineering reconstructions. Build specific devices from the notebooks to historically plausible tolerances. Show with materials of the age that a mechanism actually solves a problem in a way no known contemporary source anticipated. If we can't make them work with fair assumptions, the prophecy reading weakens. If we can, the case for extraordinary foresight grows, even if that foresight remains human. In the meantime, we can honor Leonardo best by doing what he did. Look harder. In the lab, not the rumor. In the archive, not the echo. In the patient work of aligning lines, weighing alternatives, and writing down what survives testing. He worked in a world that rewarded beauty and punished mistakes. He learned to hide methods and to reveal truths. He left behind drawings that still breathe. Whether those pages are evidence of contact with something beyond or a breathtaking display of what a human mind can do when it refuses to stop looking, may never be settled to everyone's satisfaction. But the questions he provokes are gifts. They teach us to measure our claims, to separate the glow of a symbol from the gleam of a machine, and to keep our wonder tethered to what we can show, not just what we can say. If history is a mirror, it reflects two faces tonight. The face of a genius who learned to see, and the face of a viewer learning, at last, how to look. Which lens will you reach for the next time you stand before a Leonardo, consensus or speculation? And what would it take to make you change your mind? Great stories survive because they let us hold two truths at once, wonder and restraint. Leonardo's pages invite both. One reading says, "Here is a human being who looked harder than his peers, who measured, dissected, and drew until fog became form." Another says, "Some patterns resist easy filing, and when they do, we should test bolder hypotheses without shame." The larger message is not about aliens or absolutes. It's about how we approach the unknown. In an age that rewards hot takes, we can practice cold methods, label what is consensus, what is speculation, and what is forensic or iconographic context. We can refuse to confuse resemblance with proof. We can also refuse to sneer at sincere curiosity. Those stances are not enemies. They are guardrails that keep our minds on the road while we drive into fog. There's also a civic lesson here for a U.S. audience raised on innovation myths. Breakthroughs rarely appear from thunderbolts alone. They arrive from workshops, patrons, failures, and the unglamorous habit of taking notes you expect someone to read later. Leonardo's mirror writing, whether simple privacy or deeper instinct, reminds us that ideas sometimes need shelter before they can stand in daylight. Finally, this episode is permission. Permission to experiment at home with the mirror composite. Permission to ask for receipts, museum labels, conservation images, working reconstructions, before upgrading a hunch to a headline. And permission to end a story with a question rather than a verdict. Wonder is not the opposite of rigor. It is what rigor protects. If this balanced approach speaks to you, help us keep making it. Like this video so the algorithm knows it's worth sharing. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next investigation. Comment your take, consensus, speculation, or something in between, and share this with a friend who loves art, engineering, or good mysteries. What single piece of evidence would move you most on this topic? 1. A dated note from Leonardo describing a mirror-dependent plan. 2. Conservation imaging that only clicks when the painting is mirrored. Or 3. A historically plausible device from his notebook that we can build and operate today. Explain why that evidence would change your mind, and what would still leave you unconvinced. If you've tried the mirror experiment at home, drop a link to your process and results so others can replicate your steps. Next episode tease. Up next on CA Media, we stress test Leonardo's wildest mechanisms with modern physics and period materials. What fails, what flies, and what changes the debate? Stay curious.